Now we're kicking off this evening with a presentation from Atapco Properties. I'm looking for Sean. If you are part of the presentation team, thank you, Sean. If you're part of the presentation team and I don't unmute you, Sean, you're clear to unmute. Please
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. I want to make sure I have any other team members who are presenting with you this evening.
Please unmute Michael Brawler. He just put the clap hands there.
Got it. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Very organized crew here.
And I also do have Dan Spitzen and David Polonsky on from the developer. I don't know if you want to unmute them now or just wait until there's specific questions that they may need to answer. I think might be more appropriate.
Sounds good. Happy to.
All right. If you'd like, I don't want to waste anybody's time. I appreciate everybody having us this Thursday night, and I see some familiar faces. So hopefully, this doesn't sound like wah 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 wah. But well, it hasn't changed. So nobody's going to be caught by surprise. Again, thank you for having us. This project is for 4401 Ridge Avenue. It's the property at the intersection of Ridge and Merrick Road. It's approximately an 83,000 square foot lot. And I am the attorney for the project, Sean Whalen, and most of the project will be presented by Michael Brawler. But right now you should be able to see, this is sort of a rendering, and I'll just give an introduction to the property here, and then Michael will walk you through and we can answer any questions sort of on the fly for you. So this is the project that we're proposing right here. You can see it's got about 4,700 square feet of first floor commercial space. What you can't see here, but what Michael will do a better job of describing than I will, is this is also built with a second floor overhang. So there's about another 2,200 square feet of commercial space that's actually outside, but underneath the covering. So we're really hoping to be able to activate some street life there. And right now we have it listed as a cafe. A number of questions have arisen in the past. Obviously, we don't know 18 to 24 months out who our particular tenants may be, but we're very committed to turning commercial around at this spot and making it viable given the pedestrian, bike, and car traffic. On the upper floors, we have 185 dwelling units, pretty well spread, and Michael Brawler again will go through the spread, but spread between studios, 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms. This is a very steep sloping hill, as you all probably know even better than myself. And so what we've done is to try to stack like plates back up the hill instead of kind of clearing out the hill, making a big level spot for us and building a great big building. Notably, the right here in about the center is where the pedestrian access will be. That's the main lobby. And all vehicular access will be right here. The space here, and Michael will walk through this, was purposely done to stay at or below the height of all the existing buildings, either here at Falls Ridge or what's been proposed right across the street. And as we step up back the hill, this is a true rendering. Our building will remain lower than the top of the hill and the townhomes that are up there. So we will not be blocking their view. And this is the existing tree line. So just to be clear, the property, as you've seen it here, is a very large trapezoidally shaped property. Something that's not obvious from at the outset is that our property line stops here. There's about 75 to 100 feet of uphill slope between our property line and the property line of these, the rear property line of these existing townhomes. This is actually, there's like another long, long skinny property that kind of runs here behind us. So we're not actually going really anywhere close to those townhomes up behind us. This is the site, and obviously very, very overgrown at the moment. We're going to try to keep a lot of that going. But at this point, I'm going to jump off, and I think I need to quit sharing to let Michael share this screen so he can walk you through starting with this rendering. Can you share, Michael? Michael, you're on mute.
All right, thank you.
There you go.
I muted myself because I was coughing. But
appreciate it. Understood.
and then I couldn't get back. Thanks, Sean. I'm not sure what else I'm going to talk about. Sean talked about a lot of it, and I appreciate it. Let me share first of all.
I left off on page 6 if you wanted to jump in sort of where I left off.
Great. Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Great, thanks. Right, as Sean mentioned, the site is a bit of a challenge. And we kind of looked at it where the site, someone told me at some point, you know, you take the site that it gives you, you don't try to impose your will over it. So that's what we tried to do. And I think Sean started the conversation quite well, where our intent is to kind of use the stepping of the hill and the change in elevation up Merrick Road to kind of lessen its impact on the immediate context. And as Sean mentioned, by the time we get down to the corner here, we're actually lower than the Fallsbridge lofts, and also lower than, we're about at mid-height of the pitched roof of the Fallsbridge apartments. But to kind of get your bearings a little bit, this is on the way to the on-ramp to the Schuylkill here on the west. That's that signage, retail in the corner, bike room halfway up the hill, essentially. And then what we tried to do was locate the residential entry kind of more where it starts to get more residential up towards here where it starts to be twins, and then the condos up the hill. What we tried to do, again, kind of as a response to the site, is to put the majority of the building set into the hill on the upslope. It was for two reasons. There's selfish reasons, of course, of getting views out towards the city for the units. But the driving reason was to get the mass off of Ridge. As much as we can is to protect and keep this soft edge along Ridge. It gets kind of wild. And we've been looking at the, the East Falls Development Corporation document on the master plan of their intent along there. So that's been our guide to a certain degree. But we look forward to kind of working with those folks as well. But the intent is to kind of sensitively place the building, do it in such a way where the future, if any, development along the west, which we're kind of suspect whether or not any more development will happen given the site, is to kind of create a nice segue towards the tree line in the west. I'm not going to go through kind of the particulars here, but Sean did mention that we have about 34 studios, 110 one-bedrooms, and then the same amount of 2-bedrooms as it is to studios. Some somewhat boring to some people zoning analysis. We can build 410,000 square feet, give or take. We're taking kind of more of a smaller approach, where coverage is about, our FAR is about 215, give or take. Our parking is 1-to-1, and we can go through the plans, kind of how that shakes out. But what we're trying to do is stay off of Ridge and hide that behind the tree line. These are our refusals. I'm not sure how much you folks.
Well, actually, Michael, that's a good point. Let me jump in real quick. I apologize. I'm remiss in not addressing kind of the groundwork for where we're at. So we proposed this project, and instead of doing a by right project, which would basically be a large building entirely along the frontage of Ridge, we thought that this design was much better suited to the neighborhood and to this property. And so what that means is we now have to proceed before what's called Civic Design Review Committee. That's a subcommittee of the city's planning commission. And we're hoping to do that next month. If not, that'll be in April. And what happens is their purview is to look at the overall design and materials used and things like that. So, we are looking hopefully for your feedback as well as to those issues. And as Michael was starting to get into, we've already heard a lot of comments from various constituents in the neighborhood and stakeholders, and we're trying to incorporate as much as we can, particularly along the streetscape. And we also have 2 refusals, and those refusals require us to proceed before the Zoning Board of Adjustment. That hearing will be the end of March. And those 2 refusals that we have are one for steep slopes. There's a small ribbon of steep slope, Michael's showing it right now, through the middle of the property. That was man-made when PHA built its 3 apartment buildings, decades ago. They put those steep slopes in. So we will be, building on top of that and disturbing those steep slopes with significant stormwater management to address that disturbance. The other thing that we are getting a refusal for is right underneath the larger portion is we are offering 1 loading zone. As you probably know, this property was actually upzoned in recent years by the councilman and with in association with the planning commission and the community to CMX3. CMX3 is really a heavy commercial use district throughout the city. And so because it's a CMX3 district, we are required to provide 2 basically tractor trailer sized loading zones. We will not be having any tractor trailers here. I don't want anyone to be concerned about that. As you can see from the commercial usage that we have along the frontage, that's going to be a much lower grade of use of commercial, probably drop shipped, meaning smaller trucks dropping pallets full of things at the right at their corner for them. We are not allowing, our leases do not allow any tenants to bring big rig trucks. So we're not bringing any kind of large trucks. So instead of 2 very oversized loading zones, what we did was offer 1 kind of size and a half loading zone in order to capture as many smaller Amazon, FedEx, Uber cars, any kind of smaller delivery vehicle that would be frequenting a building of this kind. So those are the 2 refusals we have. Everything else is in line with the code. And I do apologize for not saying that earlier. So we have to go to the CDR, which we would like your comment for, and we also have to go before the zoning board with regard to these 2 refusals. So sorry, Michael, I jumped in on your toes there, but
no, it's all good. Yeah, thank you. I guess this would have been more useful to have up, actually. This is where Sean was mentioning the loading zone here on the upslope, kind of adjacent to Palisades going across there. So this is our entry, our vehicular entry, kind of coincident with Palisades. And the residential entry, about 2/3 of the way up our site, and then bike room to kind of get your bearings a little bit. There is some street parking along Ridge. And again, like I mentioned, we're kind of excited. Oops, sorry, I went a little too far. I don't know if I go back. Please go back. Sorry, I'm going to jump out just for a second.
That's right. While you're talking, Mike, I'm going to address, someone put in the chat a question about how we're going to address the steep slope. So find your place and I'll address this. So as I stated, instead of coming in and kind of just clearing the site right across to make a big level site so that we can build what we want, we are actually stacking up over onto the site with our building. What that means, though, is any kind of touching of the steep slope, which is over 25% in grade, constitutes a disturbance of that land under the code. So we are disturbing it, but we're not coming in to just clear cut it. And basically all of the parking that you see there, the surface parking, underneath the entirety of it will be a stormwater basin and management system, which is specifically designed to address any kind of stormwater management the site could demand, including, but not limited to, whatever would be caused by the new drainage conditions under the building from the disturbance of the 25-foot slope, percent slope. The one other point I would make, because this is actually a perfect slide to show it, is I sort of quickly said that all access to the site will be vehicularly will be right where Michael is pointing now. That was very purposeful. There will be no ingress or egress from the site onto directly onto Ridge Avenue. It was our determination that allowing access directly off of or onto Ridge from our property would unnecessarily further snarl traffic on Ridge, because you'd have an unregulated flow in and out and people trying to make left-hand turns, cross traffic, and it would really be a mess. So what we've done is we will be working with the streets department to significantly upgrade and improve the timing of the traffic intersection. And I know that a number of the developers across the street from us also are tasked with that, with their new developments. And so we decided to use that new intersection and light to meter any traffic onto or off of Ridge. And so what'll happen is the cars will be stopped, then there will be a red light for Ridge. The cars will come off of Merrick onto Ridge, either direction, and then there will be a green light, so everyone will be stopped, and it would just meter and regulate the traffic. So go ahead, Michael.
Oh, great. Thanks, Sean. Another thing that this slide reminded me of is the fact that, granted, it's a heavily wooded site currently. There is an underground detention basin to manage water. So obviously all water will be managed onto our site on our side of the property line. We're actually looking to see potentially if it would kind of fall into the budget right now to do some kind of permeable paver in this lower section of the parking area as well. And we have what's not showing up here are some green roofs that are on these kind of areas that kind of stack up kind of playfully up Merrick Road. Like I mentioned, we're kind of excited to be working with the East Falls Development Corporation. We haven't done anything yet. I know some other developers are kind of in contact with those folks, but this is immediately in front of our site here, just streetscape improvements, which are going to be really needed and awesome. There's an intent to do a parking lot across the street here on the south side of Ridge. So our thought on that is that could work super well for that small retail element that we have on the corner. So we're kind of excited to kind of work with those folks to kind of see how we can help that. This is actually also taken from the master plan of the intent for kind of more of a naturalized woodland planting idea along the edge of Ridge, which we're kind of excited about, in that we don't see this as kind of a super manicured idea. It wants to be well taken care of course, but kind of more natural ground covers, more native species, those types of things. So we're kind of really into that as well. I apologize if I'm, if we're kind of talking things over again and again, but this is the corner of retail, the commercial space. This is the egress coming down from the residential above. And this is the 2,000 square feet, give or take, setback that we made with our building. We kind of pulled that ground level, pedestrian level back to make that possible. What retail looks like in the future, we're hopeful, but that's the intent, is do some nice outdoor seating. Again, with some, given the Schuylkill River Trail and all that, is to have bike storage up the slope, but also some outdoor bike racks as well. I'm going to go through some plans here. It might be a little dry, so I'm going to try to keep moving, but this is, again, to kind of show where retail or residential lobby is. Really, the only, on the first level, it's just the retail down on that corner of Ridge, just because of the extreme slope going up the hill. So that's the only thing that happens there. And halfway up the hill is the bike room. But again, parking, ingress, residential lobby, connection through as well as what we're developing. Some very small and boring plans, but this kind of gives you a sense. This is the second level up. So there's 2 levels of structured parking. And then below this is the parking on grade. And this just gives you a sense on levels 3 and 4, kind of it being completely filled out. And then you can kind of see as the building steps up the hill. So this is a building or a site section through the lobby looking west. Kind of gives you a sense of its adjacency and height to the Falls Bridge lofts. So we see us being lower than that, at the very least, same height. So that's the intent as we develop our building in the floor-to-floor heights. But we're kind of happy how it's kind of played out just with the site, kind of the yield, where it tells us that this is, seems like a good strategy.
Michael, can you go back to that slide real quick? I'm going to answer. This is a good time to answer a question that came up again. So if you can see the hill that slopes significantly up behind us, we are not disturbing that hill at all. That's the 75 to 100 feet, linear feet between our property and the rear properties of the townhomes. So we're not disturbing that or really coming anywhere close to those townhomes. And we're actually going to have a hard, retaining wall or building structural design anywhere that would need to support that hill from deteriorating. Obviously, we have to do that for the maintenance of the hill, but quite frankly, we have to do it for our own personal needs too. We can't have the hill coming, sliding down into our building. So, that said, we are also able to, because of the steep slope, which kind of runs right underneath where the L in residential is, coming right at us and away from us there, the zoning board can grant relief to allow the development on top of or with the disturbance of that 25% grade. Now, obviously, we're trying to limit our disturbance of that grade as much as possible, and not just do what really the Planning Commission and the city are worried about, which is coming in and clear cutting the whole site, making a big level site to work up. So, and then finally, the question with regard to parking. We have 185 parking units. You can see the garage entry here, 185 apartment units. Under the code, we're actually required to provide 56 parking spaces. We determined, internally that was basically significantly inappropriate for a project of this size in this area and in this neighborhood. So, really, Michael did some amazing design work here to get, 189 parking spaces here. So we're actually just slightly over 1-to-1, offering more than 3 times what would be required. But obviously, it's definitely necessary for this kind of apartment building and this neighborhood. So, and just to bring up a final point before we jump off this slide, the cars that would be coming in and out would be metered going on to Ridge, as I said, based on that light. It's actually the streets department that would have overview of all of the traffic and vehicular impacts by each of these new proposed projects that are coming to this area. And they would be doing sort of the holistic view and requirements for how all of those would interplay with one another. So go ahead, Michael.
Great. Thanks, Sean.
We're at the half-hour mark, and I do want to make sure that our panelists who have joined us this evening have the opportunity to speak as well. I know that many of the people on this call tonight were at the zoning meeting earlier this month. So if you would allow me to begin the panel after a moment or two more of kind of a wrap up, I think that some of the questions that are being asked in the chat immediately will inevitably be answered in that panel discussion.
Of course, Michael, I would suggest just jump to the last few slides, which show the renderings.
Sure.
And then we can sort of circle back and discuss anything that somebody has a question about.
I'm going to walk there very quickly. So we looked around the neighborhood, looked at different sites, different projects to come, but also the neighborhood in itself, which we think is more appropriate to look at. Just looking at kind of how they reveal themselves is kind of being very simple and kind of simple materials and not a lot. I guess simple is as an aesthetic kind of going through. We went back a little further, looked at the history a little bit and kind of what's there and what was there and what's still there. We love, the Falls Bridge. I mean, it's just amazing structure given the detail of it but it reading as a whole as well. So we're kind of in love with that as well. This gives you a sense, an overall things that I'm going to go through. We're looking at a kind of a zinc metal panel standing seam with a detail to it. Looking at an accent of wood in the soffits. This is kind of a Prodema wood, which handles the weather very well. And again, concrete, looking at doing, board form concrete where the building sets into the ground. So kind of a similar aesthetic, but kind of a level of detail for when the pedestrian walks up to it, they can kind of get a real sense of the intent. This is a view looking up the hill. Again, this is the building. What we try to do is set that off the street. This is that naturalized woodland along Ridge, retail on the corner. And then you could get a sense a little bit of how it steps up the hill. This is probably a better image that we started with as well, where as Sean described it as kind of plates stacked up a hill. We think the site in itself, using the site kind of broke down the mass as it is. So we're looking at this as kind of a very simple, almost background material. And that's why we're thinking it with doing something in a similar vein of zinc, which has kind of almost like a man-made quality to it that looks different in different lights. This is kind of more of a morning shot. But the idea being is that it has a varied kind of look to it, not kind of a super homogeneous look to it as well. This is kind of more of a dead-on elevation when you're on across the street in the parking lot. Granted, you're probably about 30 feet up, but this is the Merrick Road elevation, residential entry here, parking on the right-hand side there as well. I'm going to scroll through these. These are elevations. We can always refer to them if you need us to go back. This last elevation here, to Sean's point, with the tree line, the building, our estimation is that the building is coincident or even lower than the tree line that's there as well. So that's a view taken at the kind of most extreme uphill slope standing. And that's it. Landing here, kind of similar. So for you guys.
Ms. Mormon, I think I can address, it looks like I've been following the chat, and it looks like most of the comments relate to parking and traffic. So I'm happy to kind of address those globally first and see if I can't tackle a bunch of the questions people might have. So yes, there is street parking both on Merrick and Ridge. Presently, we have, I believe, 17 parking spaces in front of our property on Ridge. On the street, we are not changing those in any way, shape, or form. To be fair, the streets department may request that we make changes. We can't really know what they're in advance what they're going to ask, but taking away street spaces would be unlikely from past experience. There are also parking spaces currently allowed on Merrick. Again, we're not interfering with those. We're going to keep those. Those are metered spaces here. Now, what you can't see just across the street from just past our building is the Howe Group building that's going up is actually part of what they have to do is reconstitute and improve a prior city lot that's 30 spaces, I believe that is. So we will have that access, and we believe that that would be accessed heavily for our commercial aspect. So the street spaces for the commercial. With regard to traffic, as I said, we intended to address traffic concerns as best we could by limiting flow onto and off of Ridge through the metered light. This project does not meet the requirements to trigger a mandatory traffic study. Again, the streets department may require us to do one as we continue through this process. However, in advance, we have been working with a traffic engineer who has recently done traffic studies both pre and post COVID up and along Ridge, and has said that his initial opinion would be that from his past experience, traffic is graded in bands essentially. So it's like if you're an A road, you're great, and I don't remember if it's A, B, C, or 1, 2, 3, or whatever it is. A means you're great, you're flying along. B, C, and it gets worse and worse. His absolute opinion before we have a formal study is that whatever impact this project would have would not result in changing us from the band that we are currently in. So if we are, we know that Ridge is a heavily trafficked road. There's a lot of cut through traffic going into and out of the city and to and from the suburbs. So we know that that's a serious condition. However, we also believe we're, I think, just shy of half a mile from the train station. So we're hoping that and anticipating that a lot of people will be walking to and from the train station. It has been raised previously, and I think it was an excellent idea that when we start having this building fully operational and managed, that we set up kind of a van of sorts to shuttle people who don't feel comfortable walking that half mile over to the train station to really increase the number of people who can do that. And obviously this is a major biking route, so we anticipate that a lot of people will be biking. The last thing I saw was in the chat was with regard to the commercial space. We have heard a lot that commercial has really suffered through the years along Ridge and particularly down at this end of Ridge. But we firmly believe, based on our experience and what we're seeing, that retail will be successful here. It is aspirational at this point in time. We're obviously not putting in a huge amount of retail. We would really like to have some kind of cafe or something along those lines to activate that street frontage. And presumably there would be, the space can be divided up or subdivided rather into smaller spaces, so we could have some local retailers and really hopefully get some walkability there. As far as what price that would be at per square foot or otherwise, or what kind of retailers we may have, You know, to be frank, we haven't reached out to anybody. We all know the current state of retail is worse than dismal nationwide based on the pandemic. So hopefully when this starts to loosen up, we can turn around and start to talk to some potential tenants.
Thank you, Sean. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panelists this evening. Ron Bednar, our Lower Northwest District Planner. Steve Buckley, Senior Vice President of Planning and Environment for WSP USA. Gina Snyder, who I think most of us already know, the former Executive Director of East Falls Development Corporation, and Sean Suter, Architectural Designer. Welcome you all and thank you for coming this evening and spending this time with us. Gina, let's start with you. You've been in the neighborhood for a little while and love to hear your thoughts. I've asked all of you whose name I just mentioned to unmute. You may mute and unmute yourself now.
Can you hear me? Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep, we got you.
Yes, good, super. Okay. I want to just put this site in some context for folks because that's where I think I can give you some value. Over 20 years ago, there were just demolished buildings on this site. There was a check cashing at business at Ridge and Midvale with metal bars over the windows, and now there's La Bus. Over the 15 years when I was the director of the Development Corporation, the Riverfront Business District has really changed dramatically. Grates were taken off the windows. Majors on the corner of Ridge and Midvale got a facelift. There's new businesses and restaurants. There are almost no commercial vacancies in the district. And what vacancies there are attributable almost entirely to the condition and the layout of the business and of the buildings themselves. We have some challenges because these buildings are older and they have some difficult conditions inside of them. This site has been an eyesore for years. So it's very exciting to see something happen here. When the Planning Commission undertook the Lower Northwest Plan, this parcel was designated as CMX 3, and that was part of a community process. The neighborhood was invited and participated in the planning process. That plan was approved by the Planning Commission. Then zoning was changed. So that was just a plan. But in order for the plan to become a reality, the zoning was proposed to the Planning Commission, by the Planning Commission to make the zoning in line with the planning. And with the approval of the neighborhood, Councilman Jones introduced the zoning changes. So here we have CMX 3 as a result. I think that I don't have much more to say other than under CMX 3, and maybe Ron could even address this, the FARs would allow a much taller building than what is being proposed here. So this building height respects what is happening on Ridge Avenue. The only other comment I would give is I think at some point I'm very hopeful that people will walk through the green space in the front there, and you're going to have to create some actual paths. People will create through, they'll make desire lines because they will be wanting to come just walking to Ridge Avenue to get to places that are on Ridge Avenue. But I expect that'll just evolve over the future, and that won't be entirely a barrier. But I think it's something that management will probably address in the future.
Gina, thank you for the context. Ron, did you want to speak to Gina's point?
Yes. So basically, as Gina pointed out, this was rezoned to CMX 3. It also happens to be in the overlay that we have actually in place, which actually, and also, as Sean pointed out, there are some steep slope protection areas that sort of are designated within the ordinance to sort of be resolved. So the proposed use, is, like I said, is permitted by within the zoning district and the overlays. The zoning relief actually would be necessary for the disturbance of any steep slopes greater than 25%. The key about this is really, and Gina points out a little bit of it, which is the walkability and mixed use at this site. I'm sort of thinking that the mixed use component of this is sort of small and actually could be larger. We do definitely want to sort of be able to begin to perhaps even aspirationally see a food market of some kind, a Weaver's Way or something like that, sort of in the neighborhood with the parking surrounding here that would actually help in terms of if people didn't walk to this facility for that. I think there definitely is a market for that, as the farmers market has demonstrated that people in the neighborhood are definitely interested in fresh produce and sort of buying food locally and actually within proximity to where they live. Also, the other sort of only other major thing that I would sort of want to point out is, there really should be some, and I think this was pointed out, there will be some bike racks that'll actually be along Ridge Avenue, which I think are important. I think that any way that's possible to sort of relieve the permeability of this parking lot would be good, to sort of have perhaps a green roof application of some type around the sort of used in combination with the flood retention mechanism that actually will be put into place. I believe that the Philadelphia Water Department has a preliminary stormwater management review underway right now for the steep slopes. So we'll sort of learn a little bit more about where they're coming from on that. And that's about it. I mean, I think that I do like the way it steps back into the site. I do like the fact that, you are retaining some green space sort of at the top, and perhaps maybe in the future we can sort of look at some trails that would connect to the sort of regional trail network that we have going through to Manayunk and beyond. So, so that's actually, I think, where we're coming from right now. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Ron. I appreciate that. I want to make sure that the rest of our panelists have a chance to give their thoughts on this, ask any questions. Also, questions continue to come in chat. So for those of you who are being addressed in them or would like to address questions in the chat, please don't hesitate to pop in there and take a look. Immediately, I'm going to run over to Sean Suter, neighbor and friend. And I've unmuted you, so if the dog barks, no big deal, but you're free.
Fantastic. Okay, great. Yeah, so I just want to comment on a few, parts of the design decisions that were made here. I do appreciate that you're stepping back up onto the slope, and I think that that is a good move, and it does kind of accentuate one of the main attributes of that site is the geology. But I think maybe more could be accentuated about that decision, subtly even. But I mean, right now it's sort of an unrelenting one material choice. It's not a bad material, and I don't think you necessarily have to match the traditional materials of some of the existing architecture, but but little simple choices, maybe even like contrasting reveals between the different steps, or making it have some matching complementary colors of a few different sections to make it seem more of like an assembly of parts as opposed to one big unrelenting spaceship. I think would go like would go pretty far in reducing sort of like the visual immense impact of this very large building. My only other major comment would be that planting area that you chose to sort of put up against the sidewalk on Ridge. I am, I looked at the survey and it looks like you kind of have a, yeah, like you said, like a natural, a local species led planting plan there, which I don't think is a bad idea, but I do think that there's an opportunity at that spot for some sort of gesture, maybe some sort of usage of the stone or the reuse of, I believe there's stone retaining walls there that I imagine will have to remove. Using some of that existing site attributes to have some sort of like, as we're trying to continue to build this ridge corridor, your site will likely be one of the first sites that people will see coming from the north end, from your Maniacan Ridge coming down on Ridge. So that type of visibility and that sort of gateway position, I think lends itself to thinking about some sort of either gesture of like a specific planting or a specific move, or even space for a local artist to put something there that really adds some character to that first sight of someone coming southbound on Ridge. If you're capable to put that in the plan. So, but overall, I think for what could be built on this building, I think you made some. I think there's some good choices here, and I'm really hoping it can as a customer base, not only support your commercial plan here, but also the ambitions for the corridor in general.
Well, Michael, between Sean and Ron, you probably have some thoughts. I want to get to Steve, but let's give you a chance to respond to Ron and Sean. That's fun to say, by the way. I just want everybody to know, in case you didn't see my message in the chat, I do typically keep this at an hour. I will, if our presenters are willing and able to go over, I will do so. We will not get to all of the questions. Inevitably, I've consolidated a few of them into bullet points so we can get to a couple hereafter, but I will make these questions available after the fact, and then we will publish on East Falls Forward website the responses if our presenters are able to create those for us. I know there's a lot going on in everyone's world, so an assumption on my part, but I will make sure that we have those questions and that we make them available. Michael.
I'm available for as long as you guys want to talk.
Oh, no, that's not how we go. But I do appreciate it. But
I will warn you, my 5-year-old will come in at some point asking for stories to go to bed.
We all have the same 5-year-old in the form of a number of things: cats, dogs, kids, pups. So I appreciate that. I will extend the meeting for a half an hour so that we can answer some of these questions. So we are now going until 8:30. That's new. We don't usually do that. Apologies to those who didn't plan for such. Again, I bullet pointed some questions, but I would like Michael to be able to respond to some of Sean's thoughts, given that they are design oriented. And also if Ron said anything that you made a note on or that you'd like to cover, please don't hesitate.
No, I think they're super perceptive, and I would like to respond to the ones I can remember. But it's just kind of starting on the west there, those existing stone walls, we would love to kind of keep those in place if we can, after we inspect them and see what they look like. There were some old stone retaining walls and stairs that went up to the old PHA buildings. But as soon as we kind of peel back all the overgrowth, we're going to kind of see what's there. But I would love to be able to keep that edge and keep that, that old stone work. The comment about kind of breaking up the building, I think that's again, kind of a very perceptive comment, because the reality is that upper slope building, there's going to be a building joint there. So inherently there's going to be a line. So there could be an opportunity to, as this steps down, is to kind of even underline or emphasize the kind of stepping through a different joint pattern, vertical joint, you know, a lot of things. So I think there's kind of embedded idea of jointing going on just from the reality of construction on the upslope that could cascade down to kind of make it less of more of a design move rather than kind of a necessity from structure. But yeah, those are awesome comments and great, considering I know how hard it is to kind of see something presented and think of tangible things to talk about, and those are all great, and I look forward to kind of looking through them. I don't know if there's anything else, any other comments you need me to.
We'll bring more to you, Michael. I'm gonna head over to Steve Buckley. Steve, I've asked you to unmute, but you have to, there you go. You have to do it yourself, sorry.
Yeah, no, I think it's, I mean, this was involved in East Falls Zoning Committee a long time ago. Obviously, the one thing that I think is really going to help the commercial corridor is intensifying, but doing so in a way that's respectful of the surrounding neighborhoods. You know, exceeding the parking minimums, you know, in this location, there is going to be people who maybe don't want to use their cars, but will have cars. Some things to think about, I probably would say, is, you know, looking to see if you can leverage car sharing. You'll have probably a lot of people at this location that might not need a car all the time, but would like access to it, and what that can do in terms of perhaps providing some interior visitor parking, as opposed to, you know, hosting the retail on the local ground floor. You're going to probably attract some drive-up parking. So there will be some need for parking on this. So thinking about that, obviously, I think you guys are probably trying to build in some of the things like the electric charging, and I don't think you need access for tractor trailers. I would say, though, at this site with this many units, probably thinking about how you accommodate move in, move out, first of the month type things is something to think about. I didn't get from your plans how the whole back works, though. It looks like there's multiple access points to upper and lower parking. I don't know if don't need to dive into the detail here, but it looks like there was a second driveway that went to the upper parking, and then the first one went down and wrapped around, but went down. I didn't quite get that configuration, so that's one piece to work on, or perhaps provide more clarity. Two pieces, I didn't see how stormwater management would be handled, and maybe that's covered with some of the roofs, and you're going to work through that with the water department. And then also in the renderings on the west edge of it, it looks like from your plans that you're getting very tight to the sidewalk there. While it shows a lot of greenery, it looks like it gets pretty thin, to be honest with you, in terms of how far the parking comes into that. So I would agree to the extent you can sort of keep the existing vegetation or mask it, or mask the whole parking piece of it. I think that would be great. But overall, I really like the layout, and I like the fact that you're putting some ground floor retail in there. I don't know what you attract. I think this space was 5,000 square feet in that space. Can you maybe comment on what type of business that might attract?
So certainly, I don't know, Mr. Buckley, if you want me to jump in now, or you want to finish your comments and then we can respond to everything at once. You're on mute.
Thank you. It remuted me.
I will share that once somebody mutes themselves again, I have to go back and give them.
Gotcha. Sorry about that. I didn't know that.
No, it's not. It's not.
I didn't want to hear my dog barking in the background. That's all. No. One final thing is, and I don't think it's an issue. Obviously, it's congested down here. Looking about how you can accommodate perhaps a left turn bay that might be needed. So I would probably say trying to work with the streets department sooner than later to figure out whether or not you're going to need a left turn bay in this location to keep Ridge Avenue functioning would probably be just something to be mindful of. Not sure it's required, but it might be helpful for the site.
And I'm just going to add to that, Steve. The number one comment, as bulleted, is about traffic and the variety of concerns. I know that Sean Whalen, you addressed this earlier as to the fact that there is an ongoing traffic study being done as we speak, not a formal one that's required, but you are seeking consultancies there. Correct me if I misspoke. But can you go back to that one more time? I want to make sure that everybody who's on now and our numbers are shifting gets that information again.
Of course, and I think actually that flows a lot into what Steve was just talking about, and some of what Ron brought up.
Sean, are you being punny? The traffic flows.
Oh,
Were you unintentionally punning? Okay,
I was unintentionally punning.
Continue.
So a number of different aspects there. Firstly, Steve, to your point, we are going to use car sharing spaces. They're not on the plan now because it's not actually part of the zoning process if you're, putting them in without the requirement. And again, to Gina's point, this site as a CMX3 site basically affords a giant tower with 400 plus units. We're not proposing that. We're not saying that that's coming ever. And that could be by right. We didn't think that was appropriate. We significantly scaled it down to try to mix up the unit count. I saw a number of issues with this. There is green roof aspects, from what Ron said. There are individual roof decks up top. So a lot of the 2 bedrooms that are sort of on the top levels where it steps back, as Michael was saying, there are individual roof decks for those units. And notably, even our studios are relatively large. So, that there are no micro units, in a lot of projects I'm seeing around town, even some that my clients are presenting, you're seeing, 350, 400, 450 square foot units. We are not presenting any units of that size. We are anticipating an older crowd who wants their space and wants to be able to, enjoy this for the long term and not have a high turnover building. Which leads us directly to the traffic. And yes, this is, I wouldn't even say it's the elephant in the room. It's more than that. It's what everyone knows. We all know Ridge can be a parking lot in and of itself. And a lot of that has to do with, the cut through traffic coming, for people trying to escape 76 and whatnot. We have already started to engage the streets department. We are actively trying to, quite honestly, both selfishly, because it's vital to our project. We want people to be here and like the project that we're building, so they need to be able to, get where they want to go and move around with the flow. But it's also, important with a project of this size and scope. So again, what I said before is there is no ingress or egress directly off of Ridge into our project. That was purposeful, because that would be sort of unregulated flow onto Ridge that could really snarl up the flow of Ridge, especially if people are making left-hand turns, cutting across. I mean, frankly, we've all seen enough situations, even if there were no left-hand turn signs, everyone who wanted to would still do it anyway. So we just decided to cut that off entirely. There's no curb cut whatsoever on Ridge. Therefore, we are forcing all of the traffic up onto Merrick, which, as several people pointed out, means we really need to make sure that we get the intersection right? And there are a number of brand new projects being proposed around this intersection. The streets department is working with not only each project individually, but they also take a holistic view, because they're the ones who know all the projects that are coming in at the same time. And therefore, they will be determining what has to happen to work with this intersection. We are absolutely dedicated, be it a dedicated left-hand turn lane, better pedestrian crossing, better bike crossing. Frankly, this is a dangerous place to cross right now as a pedestrian or a bicyclist. Can we put a center median in that would allow people to get halfway across and then pause and be able to get more safely across? All of those things are on the table, again, because not only is it the right thing to do and it's needed for the neighborhood, but it's also a selfish desire, right? Like that all of those improvements make our project better. So therefore our interests are aligned, and hopefully we can get to that, that real streetscape plan that, we've been provided by some of the stakeholders here. Again, we're using the car sharing. We anticipate a lot of bicycling. We anticipate a lot of people using this to get to and from public transit, not only buses, but also the train. We are absolutely going to, when this is occupied, start investigating the use of, and if somebody on here is the one who suggested it at the last meeting with EFCC, I think it was a terrific idea, and we've incorporated it already in our plans, is to have some kind of dedicated shuttle to the train station for our residents and whatnot, trying to get as many people out of their cars as possible. And I know that we're trying to maximize the amount of parking, but we're also interested in trying to limit the number of people who are having cars and are parking. And that is a situation that has been decreasing in recent years. Again, I hope I didn't go on too long, and I'm happy to answer any other questions that people.
No, quite all right, Sean. I know Dave wants to add to this as well.
Thank you. I wanted to address some of the questions about stormwater and to give a little clarification on the parking. Right now, as the property is, there's no stormwater management. And when the other
Hey, Dave, just to interrupt you real quick, please identify yourself for everyone.
Oh, I apologize.
Thank you.
My name is Dave Polonsky. I'm with Atapco Properties. So we are the owner of the property, and we're the developer. And we've built several apartment buildings, and I will say that this site we're very excited about because of its unique nature. The plans we were given for the previous that someone had made for this project once before had a building just lining the street, and the rest of the whole site was a parking lot, no trees. We looked at that and thought, well, there's going to be more buildings across the street, and we've got this beautiful hill, and it overlooks the beautiful hill and the river. And why would we be, building apartments that have no view and that are right up on the street? So that was a big piece of sort of how we laid out the site. The stormwater, so what we're doing for stormwater is underneath the parking lot, there's a large detention facility filled with gravel. And what that does is it collects all the water from the site and will do two things. One, clean it, and two, it will hold it. And then it releases it slowly. So the water that leaves this site will never be a higher quantity than was before. It'll be a controlled release. We have some green roof right now, and we're looking at increasing that. But the whole edge of the upper roof has a green strip along it, and there's several other green strips. I wanted to point out, someone had asked about balconies before. The top units actually, the top floor of apartments actually have lofts that go up to that roof deck, and for those individual units. And then no one pointed this out, but on the second roof, that middle one, there's an outdoor amenity that's for the entire building. So that's meant to, and there's a 2-story amenity space in that corner there. So that people can really enjoy the river. We've even been thinking about possibly adding some balconies along the facade on the hill as well. And I wanted to mention one other thing one of the gentlemen brought up, where the northern end or the far end of this site, where that sign is. We have a very small wall. The parking does get close to that corner. I acknowledge that. There's a very small retaining wall up there. And one of the things we would like to do is make that out of stone, maybe reuse some of the stone that we found. And there's actually an opportunity. Someone mentioned that that's sort of the gateway to East Falls. I think that little wall we put there, we would consider, letting that be a feature for East Falls. Welcome to East Falls or something. But I agree, that's going to be an entry point for people. And while we said it's a naturalized landscape there, the point is that people on the street, we didn't want them to be hit with the parking lot. The parking lot sits up a little bit in back, and so the idea is to screen it. And then you will see the building up against the hill, but it's nestled into the hill. I think so. With stormwater, the other issue about parking is we do have a 2-level parking deck. So under that back long building are 2 levels of parking. And so there is a second driveway that leads to a ramp that goes up to the 2nd level. And that would actually be controlled access. Someone said a lot of people want to have a car, but they don't actually drive it a lot. Well, they could rent a spot up on the 2nd level and store it there. So there's 2 levels of parking, but that on the top edge, you can see there's a ramp. Yes, right there. Thank you. And that leads up to the 2nd level of parking, which is basically identical to the piece directly under the building. There you go. So that's the 2nd level of parking. And that ramp is the only way in and out, so it doesn't tie to the rest. That's why there's that 2nd ramp there.
And I think Dan had some additional commentary on this topic.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Felicity. I'm Dan Spitz, and I work with Dave. We are with Atapco, and we're the developers of the project. I had a comment that I wanted to make, Felicity, on another discussion point that unfortunately passed because I had to remute my mic. So, yeah, I mean, I think Dave hit on a number of key sort of design and massing and planning decisions that were critical in the decisions around how we designed the building and how we oriented the building. I think we've heard a few times from the community about just taking advantage of its proximity, the building's proximity to the river. And, we've been very mindful of that from the very beginning. By putting the building sort of a little bit further back on this sloping site, it really accentuates the, sort of the closeness to the river. As I think Dave mentioned, if we had sort of built more along Ridge Avenue, we, folks in our building would be looking straight into the buildings across the street as opposed to over them and to the beauty of what this neighborhood, what we believe will attract people to this neighborhood. So.
Thank you. I don't know who would like to address this. If you're not unmuted, please let me know. But we do have the second most hashed request is around environmental impact. We've discussed water extensively, but if we could also address the loss of trees, while I certainly appreciate the intention behind keeping the forest and the step up that's there now, I think there is some concern about losing the footprint here, not just in East Falls, but in Philadelphia generally, of our older trees, if you will. And then solar, and being in sustainability and multifamily myself, I understand the challenges of solar and multifamily, but certainly I think it's a valid question and worthy of a conversation. Not sure who to pass that to, but let me know if I need to unmute.
I think Dave needs to be unmuted, and I will just like in advance of what Dave said. I think as a firm, we do a lot of lead development, and we understand a lot that goes into sort of the lead certification, as well as just the general sort of desire to be environmentally friendly in the developments that we do. It's actually I think someone pointed out in the chat, it's on our website, and it is a key factor and consideration for us. The site itself, I think we have a slide that shows the history of the site. I mean, while the site appears fairly green currently, it really is like sort of overgrown shrubbery more than anything else. And the strip that we're looking at right now, the strip of trees behind us isn't even our property. That's the property that's not part of our parcel, so that those trees will not be touched. So this site was cleared many, many years ago for a previous HUD or PHA development. We alluded to that in the previous discussions. And so really it's just overgrown is what the site is. And, the appearance of green is really, I mean, I can't speak specifically to the specific types of flora and fauna on the site, but I think that, we will definitely in the designs that we've shown you really make an attempt to maintain the greenery and reduce the harshness of the building that we'll see as it touches Ridge. Dave, I'll let you go and talk a little bit further about the environmental sustainability points.
Can I just make one clarification or kind of hopefully help, is that, you know, taking down any trees at all, like I personally don't like doing. I live on 2 acres, and every time I lose a tree, it's like a death in my family, it feels like. But the point here is that this image that you see on the screen, this was, you know, after they took down the PHA buildings. But the point is that, and again, don't want to see any trees go, but it's not old growth forest by any stretch. And like I said, I don't want to see any of them go, but it's not as if we're clear cutting. We're trying to do something as much as we can sensitive to it. But that's all I want to say.
This is Dave Plonsky again with developer. I would like to mention, we take a lot of pride in sustainability. When we present projects to our board, one of the things we have to report on is sustainability as well. And I personally have built 2 LEED Platinum apartment buildings and 1 LEED Gold apartment building in Maryland. They were the first 2 Platinum buildings for apartments in Maryland. So we're very sustainably focused. The building will be incredibly efficient. There'll be efficient individual unit HVAC in each unit. We create a good thermal envelope around the building. We're very cognizant of the stormwater things, which I think we've talked about in depth a little bit. Normally, when there are incentives to help, we go further. Obviously, when you're building a project, it has to make money. So we're looking at where we spend our environmental money, I should say. To the extent that in Maryland that they actually have some property tax credits for LEED buildings, it helps us go further. There are no efficiency or no green tax credits or incentives at all in Philadelphia or East Falls that would help us. There is a solar tax credit, and I've heard that brought up a few times. And we have done solar in the past. The last 3 buildings I built had solar. The challenge here is that it's hard for solar not to lose money on in this particular project because of the way the incentives are worked. When we've done it in the past, we've been able to cobble together the federal tax credit and some local tax credits to be able to do that. What I will say is we're looking at doing more green roof. But in this case, I don't think solar would be part of this project. I just think it's not economically feasible for us. Other things we use Energy Star, all Energy Star appliances. We use all VOC-free materials. We use low flow water fixtures. We generally get 40% savings over what the requirements are. We'll have all low flow. We'll actually have dual flush toilets. We do motion sensors in all of our corridors and in our garage and in all of our stairwells, all the public spaces, so that the lights don't stay on. And in the garages, we have basically low level lighting unless someone drives in. Same thing for the corridor. When you walk out your door, the lights come on, except for the emergency lighting is always on. So we do a lot of things, and we will do all of those things on this project. Solar is not part of the scope right now. And I don't believe we're going to go for a specific certification because there just isn't an incentive to do so. We will build a very efficient building.
And again, being in the sustainability space for multifamily, I certainly understand the challenges of solar, given the square footage available for the number of units that it would need to support, and also the limitations of battery storage today. So thank you for addressing it. If you would like some contacts with the Philadelphia Energy Authority, happy to make those for you. There's a lot of good work going on around solar. Neighbors, if you haven't engaged the Philadelphia Energy Authority in solar for your home, please consider doing so. I certainly am. It is an investment, but for the sustainability minded on our call tonight, a tremendous benefit to Philadelphia generally. at Philadelphia Energy Authority. Just scrolling through the questions, we have hit the two big topics, traffic and environmental offsets. If I missed your question and it pertains to something other than those two things, we do have, and this was addressed by presenters tonight, we do have some aspirations to keep the commercial space local if possible, but I'm certain that working with East Falls Development Corporation, that can be successfully accomplished. So I don't think that is, you know, personally, I keep thinking of Froyo will show up here any minute, and yet there's none. But I also very fond of our local businesses and supportive. So happy to work on that to make sure that commercial space is successful. There is one question that's been asked a couple of different ways as I'm scrolling. It's regarding traffic again, but the question is around how do you interpret, anticipate, forecast who will use our public transportation, which everyone in my family does who has to go downtown, versus those who will use parking spaces for cars. So I don't know the answer to this question. I've always been curious. I certainly see the trend in multifamily today of reducing the number of parking spaces per units. This, if you missed it, is a 1-to-1 ratio, which is more than is required. So one unit has one parking space. Again, correct me if I'm wrong. So this is more than the zoning board requires today. So we're not seeking a variance for that, but if anybody has any insights into how that is forecast, I think that might be useful information.
I'm happy to jump in here, Ms. Mormon. So obviously these are trends that are heavily watched both by the city council and, you know, all of their constituents pressing for different things, all of the different stakeholders in the city. I will tell you that pretty much across the board, developers are seeing throughout the city about 40% of whatever parking they offer is being used by their own tenants, and the other 60% is being used by neighbors. So as multifamily goes forward, the actual tenants are using less and less parking themselves. Now, with regard to this site, this isn't, you know, Center City or South Philly where things are even more crowded. And we are certainly going to have people here at this, this building who actually work, you know, out in King of Prussia or Plymouth Meeting or Conshohocken, and they just want to live somewhere way cooler than Plymouth Meeting or Conshohocken or King of Prussia. And you know, they're going to be going out that way. Or you could definitely have a lot of couples, this is very common now, where one member of the household works in King of Prussia and one member works in Center City. So you would have people using it. And that's why we tried to increase the parking. So the parking requirement, again, is for our number of units, it's 3 to 10 under the code. That's what, you know, the city has determined is applicable. That would lead to rounding up 56 parking spaces. We just thought that was wholly inappropriate for this property. So that's why we're offering as many parking spaces as we can. And obviously Michael had to get very creative about how he was going to have dual access and you know, get that many parking spaces in there without, you know, we purposely did not want this to feel like from any view shed a parking garage. And so, you know, more and more people are shying away from, and certainly I think this has been expedited by the usage of car sharing and Uber and Lyft and things of that sort. But, you know, the trend really is to utilize your car less, but we're still trying to maximize parking to offset any danger there. So,
and I'll chime in a little bit further and sort of repeating a little bit of what Sean said, but you know, this is a desirable location for us as developers because frankly, there are multiple options for people to take advantage of other than just getting in their car. You're only a half a mile to the regional rail station that takes you both into the city as well as to some of the points that the places that Sean mentioned, Conshohocken, et cetera. And we're literally a block away from the path that takes you right into the city. So I would definitely expect people to take advantage of, especially on nicer days, the ability to get on their bike and ride into the city. We're also very proximate to Balconies and some other areas that people can access maybe by bicycle or a short Uber or Lyft ride. And to Sean's point, as a developer, we've also seen a significant reduction in the utilization of on-site parking. I don't know, I don't know that there's a definitive way to measure that and to determine whether there's but I think the trends are all moving towards less car ownership, more shared, car share or Uber and Lyft options, and then other ways of getting from point A to point B. And that is important. And it's interesting that the zoning has, over time reduced the parking requirements for these projects. But yet, obviously, in the communities, there's a demand to make sure that these developments don't overburden the currently existing tight sort of on-street parking and what have you. So you balance the two, and that's what we try to do, to try to make the parking available. But we will certainly be encouraging people to take advantage of the alternatives.
I was kind of note, we normally include about 1.5 spaces per unit. That's been our trend in the past. So this is a downsizing.
But that is for Dave, that's for a more suburban project.
Right, I was going to say, and that recognizes that we're between the city and suburbia. This sort of falls into the middle. We did look at actually trying to provide less parking. We thought it would inhibit us being able to maybe lease some units, because people, even if they do want all the conveniences you have here in public transportation, still have a car. So we wanted to plant more trees. We wanted less parking lot. We looked at a bigger garage, but we thought that was, too much structure. So the building was even getting bigger. So it was a compromise. Some people were thinking one's a lot, and some people think it's not enough. We think it fits East Falls in this location.
Great. Well, we have 5 minutes left this evening. I want to remind everybody that East Falls Forward does a straight Democratic vote. We provide those results to the zoning board. So you should watch for your email that will give you the link to have your voice heard. That will come out this weekend, and we will do a 48-hour voting period. I would like to reiterate the major concerns, questions this evening one more time for our presenters, knowing that you have multiple meetings in front of you. They were environmental impact, traffic, and aesthetics. So some variation in the facade, etc. A question that we didn't get to this evening, there are multiple historical references for this site, not the least of which was Fort Dana during the Civil War. Thank you, Sean. So we will include in the questions that we make available to you that information, as well as additional information that we weren't able to discuss this evening. Parting thoughts, I'm going to pass back to our panel. Presenters, thank you so much. We appreciate that you have spent the time to do this, not once, but twice, and that you will inevitably be hearing from many of us again in the future. But we do appreciate your efforts and also your responsiveness to feedback.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate you guys too. Thank you.
Thank you all very much for your time.
All right.
On a totally different subject, I'm going to respond to a comment about an agreement, historical agreement with regard to this parcel. In my opinion, there is no agreement with a PHA with respect to the parcel. This is old history. When the public housing was scheduled to be demolished, and was demolished, there was planning and litigation. And the end result was to have a mixed income and mixture of rental and home ownership housing. 2 phases were agreed to by the PHA to resolve the litigation, and they were built out, and that's what we see there. This project was actually the third phase that was referenced and designated on the plan for 30 units of market rate rentals. There was no agreement between PHA and the EFCC about this parcel. And in fact, when the 2 phases were built out, that third phase was eliminated from the plan by PHA, and they sent that plan to HUD, and the revised plan was approved by HUD. This is sort of redredging of old history. I think it's behind us. Ridge Avenue, the Riverfront Business District, has changed a lot, and it's time to really look into the future and to look forward.
So I am unmuting Sean to respond as an attorney from a legal perspective. I also am unmuting Emily. I'm going to allow Sean, just because he was first in my messages. So Emily, as soon as he's done, I know that there's some passion around this topic for all of the reasons that make sense and all of the reasons that we love East Falls. So we will take this moment. We may run further over. All of you know me know.
Sorry.
Pains me desperately, but here we are.
So thank you very much. I will be as brief as I can be. Thank you, Gina, for your comments. There have been numerous assertions over recent months as we've been bringing this project to the forefront that there's an agreement with PHA, somehow long-standing. Not to belabor anyone's time this evening, that's a legal determination that would have to be made by the courts. It is our position, in line with Gina's, that there is no such agreement. However, at this point, it would simply be, me having an oral argument with Ms. Nichols or anyone else who would want to speak on this topic. We will be in very short, we will be the owner of the property in fee simple, free and clear. There are no, nothing recorded against the property and no enforceable agreements as far as we are concerned. However, I am cognizant that a lot of people have made such assertions from the late 90s, and simply posit that that's not the purview of, nor can it be raised at CDR or the zoning board. It would have to be raised and dealt with by a court separately. So I don't want to waste anyone's time with legal arguments back and forth, but in short, that's where things stand. Thank you.
Sorry.
Emily, I understand what Sean Whalen, just for clarity, since we have a couple Seans, my favorites. So please don't hesitate to speak on this, but I do understand the point that there's nothing that we as an organization, East Falls Forward, can do this evening to make a determination on that. So that's just legal information for everyone on the call. Certainly voices should be heard.
Yes, thank you for letting me speak, Felicity. I agree that it's not for really anyone on this call to make a determination on that, and that's why I wanted to address what Gina said. To say quite clearly, we can't say whether or not the agreement that exists, which dates back to the late 90s and came into force as recently as 2015, whether or not it's still legally binding would be determined by the courts. So to be quite honest, I think it's sort of irrelevant to this particular conversation, and it's inappropriate to make a statement that it doesn't exist or it doesn't apply, because I think neither Gina or, as Sean himself said, is in a position to make that determination. So we at Community Council believe that, in fact, the agreement does still apply, but ultimately it's going to be determined by legal minds, which I am not one of them.
Yeah, Emily, I was responding to something that was written by Bill. So I didn't raise the issue. It was a response to an assertion, and I just made an assertion as well.
Right. So I think probably, since it hadn't really come up in the outward communication, it was in the chat, I would say that the issues that, whether or not an agreement exists, it's really about the reasons why the agreement exists. So I think all the issues that were discussed tonight about traffic, about environmental studies, about the impact on the community, possibly about the aesthetics of the building, are probably the really relevant issues for people to think about when they decide how they're going to vote on this.
Absolutely.
We certainly have a lot to think about, ponder. Please do check the chat. Sean Whalen was kind enough to put his contact information in the chat. You will be receiving an email shortly with more information. Thank you again to our panelists. Thank you again to our presenters. Thank you again to this phenomenal community who cares so much about who we are and who we become, frankly. It is phenomenal becoming with you. So thank you all for the extra time this evening, certainly warranted and appreciated by all of us.
Appreciate you having us.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Everybody.